am going to make review of Sudha Murthy's book called The Magic Drum and Other Favorite Stories. I enjoyed this book very much and I enjoyed all stories in this book, so I am sharing few stories with you. The first story is called The Supermen. This story is about the men of Suvarnagiri who were very lazy. And the second story is called A Fair Deal. This story is about Himakar and Sitapati, who were two young men living in neighboring villages. This story is called The Seed of Truth. This story is about the country of Gandhara, who was ruled by the just and good king called Vidyadhara and a poor young boy. This story is called The Haripant the Wise. It is about the Vijayanagara emperors and there lived a wise magistrate named Haripant. This story is called The Last Laddu. This is a story about a miserly old couple called Devaya and Devamma who wanted to eat a more laddu. This story is called The Tastiest of All. This is about King Shantivardhana who ruled over the kingdom of Vaishali. This story is called The Cunning Fruit. It is about Udanka, who was a rich merchant with a vast business in North India. This story is called 9 Questions for a Princess. It is about Princess Surya Prabha, who was very beautiful and intelligent, wanted to marry a man who was even more intelligent and learned than her. This story is called Dead Man's Painting. It is about Raghupati, who was a rich landlord who had a son called Sahadeva and a stepwife called Arundhati and Krishnakant, a magistrate. This story is called The White Crow. It is a story about Uma Sundari, who was a very talkative woman and learnt lesson in the last. This story is called The Horse in the Burrow. It is a story about Niranjan, who was a very clever man. This story is called The Very Expensive Coconut. This story is about Chandrakant, who was a miser. This story is called The Wise King. It is a story about in the city of Manmatapura, which stood by the sea, there lived a young boy called Veeravara. This story is called A Bottle of Dew. It is a story about Ramanatha, who was the son of a rich landlord. The story is called Two Thieves, and it is a story about two thieves who are very poor. This story is called The Best Friend, and it is a story about Keshava, who was a lonely washerman and his best friend was a donkey. This story is called Good Luck Gopal, and it is a story about Gopal, who was a good-natured but very dull boy. Story is called Nakul's First Lesson. It is a story about Nakul and Bhaskar, who was a wealthy, worldly, wise merchant. Story is called Golden Silence, and it is a story about Somesh, who was a boy of 10. The story is called Emperor of Alakavati, and so it is a story about Sumant, who was a bright young man. This story is called The Case of the Missing Necklace. It is the story about Princess Chandravati, who was very beautiful and lost her necklace. The story is called A Question of Maths, and it is a story about Srimukha, who was a clever but poor farmer. This story is called The Clever Brothers. This is a story about 3 brothers who were very clever. This story is called The Lucky Purse. This is a story about Mallika, who was a daughter of rich landlord. This story is called Two Unforgettable Lessons. It is the story about Amrutananda and Kapila Deva, who were landlords in neighboring villages. This story is called United We Stand. It is a story about Maruti and Mahadeva who lived in the same village and were very rich businessmen. This story is called Where Did It Go? And it is a story about a shrewd shopkeeper called Makaran. The story is called The Princess Who Was a Bird. I love this story, so I will tell this story now. Long ago there lived a beautiful princess. When she grew into a lonely young woman, her father wanted her to get married. In fact, there was a long queue of princes eager to marry her. But the princess would not even look at them. She would not have anything to do with a man apart from her father, she declared. The poor king was puzzled and wondered what had happened her to hate men so much. He tried pleading and begging and commanding, but the princess was firm. In the meantime, the entire kingdom had come to know about the princess' refusal to get married, and the people could talk of nothing else. One day, a handsome prince from a neighboring kingdom heard about the princess and was curious about her. He wanted to see this princess, famous for her beauty, and perhaps convince her to marry him. So he disguised himself as an ordinary man and came to her kingdom. He stopped at an inn for the night where he hoped to meet someone who could tell him the story of the princess who hated men. Then he got lucky. He happened to meet a woman who took flowers to the palace every day for the princess's garlands. He chatted with the old woman for a long time and found out the entire story. The princess had lost her mother when she was a little girl. She had been brought up by a nurse. This nurse would tell her a story every day. The story was about a pair of myna birds that lived in a nest in a thick forest. They had many beautiful chicks and were proud of their neat little nest. They were also deeply in love with each other. But one day a fierce fire started in the forest and the flames started climbing towards their nest. "Let us take our chicks and flee," the female myna told her husband, but he would not hear of it. "There is nothing to worry," he said. "I will look after you all." The flames came closer and closer, and the female myna kept begging her husband to save their chicks, but he told her to relax and did nothing. When finally the fire reached the tree and started licking at the nest and the wife was getting burnt with her babies, she saw her husband fly away, leaving them to die. The princess would ask her nurse to tell her this story every day, and after a while began to believe she had been the female myna in her previous life. So in this life she did not want to trust any man or marry. The prince thought hard all night and decided what he would do next. As soon as it was morning, he arrived at the king's palace. There he demanded an audience with the king. He introduced himself as a storyteller. "I have travelled many lands and know many stories," he said loudly. "I can tell you wonderful tales from all over the world. My only condition is I will not talk to a woman." The king was surprised. "Why do you say such a thing?" he asked. By then the prince saw that the prince too had arrived in the court and was listening to him from behind his screen. He declared his throat and said, "That is the oddest tale in my collection. During my wanderings, I met a sage. I served him for many days and he became very pleased with me. One day, happy with my devotion, he told me the story of my previous life. I was a male myna then. I used to live in a thick green forest with my myna wife and our little chicks. One day there was a fire and the flames started creeping up towards our tree. I told my wife, 'Let us go from here,' but she would not listen. 'There is enough time,' she said to me. When finally the fire reached the nest and began to burn me and the chicks, I saw my wife fly away to save herself, leaving us to die. Ever since I heard that story, I have hated women and have decided not to talk with, let alone marry one." When she heard this, the princess pushed aside the screen and appeared before the prince, her eyes blazing with anger. "How dare you?" she shouted. "I was the one who wanted to save everyone and you were the one who left us to die. I was that female myna in my previous life." But the prince argued back, "It was not you but I who died in that fire." The argument carried on for a while. Finally, the king managed to get a word in. "Stop, stop," he commanded. "No fighting in court. Perhaps you two were married to each each other in your previous lives, and perhaps something did happen which made one of you live in a time of need. Now you must understand that friends and partners always together. When something goes wrong, they help each other. Why don't you two get married in this life too and see if you can help one another in good times and bad, like the best of friends, and make up for the mistakes of your past lives? The prince and princess stopped shouting long enough to take a good look at each other and think over these words. The princess saw the princess in intelligent and kind eyes. She decided to heed her father's advice, and the two got married soon after. And yes, they lived happily for many years through good times and bad like best friends. So it was a very good story. I liked the story very much. Then the next story's name is The Price is Right. It is a story about Somendra, who was a cunning merchant. This story is called A Lesson for the Uncles. This story is about Rajendra, who was a young boy who had lost both his parents when he was still quite young. This story is called A Bag of Words. This story is about Kirti Kumara, who was a handsome young shepherd who could play the flute wonderfully. This story is called Magic in the Air. This story is about Sheelavati and Jaishil, who were a very old couple. This story is called The Selfish Groom. It is a story about the Dhanagupta, a famous and rich merchant, had only one son called Yashodhana, and he was very selfish. This story's name is The Tired House, and it is a story about Purushottam, who was a poor farmer. This story is called A Minister's Test. This is a story about a king who ruled his kingdom with great wisdom. This story is called A Cure for Laziness. This is a story about Bashir, who had promised himself that he would marry a girl who was intelligent as him and hard-working as he was. This story is called The Magic Drum. This is a story about Ramchandra and Rama, who were an old couple. So I enjoyed all these stories, and all the stories were very nice. And Sudha Murthy, a senior and famous writer, has written all the stories very well in this book, and she has written in simple English, and all the children can read and enjoy this. So I loved this book. And if you have liked my review of this book, and if you want many more reviews like that, stories and other things, please subscribe my channel. Thank you.